I want to make a few statements, and I want to see if you agree with them or disagree with them. Do you agree or disagree that you were made for more than you're currently experiencing? Do you agree that you were made to count? Your life, actually you, all of you, the gross parts and the nice parts. You were made to count, and that you were made to make a difference. Those are very leading pastoral manipulative questions. So clearly, that's a communications tactic. But yes, the answer is yes. And then let me ask you a few questions, kindly, genuinely. Are you living the life that you long for? Are you? Does the fruit of your life match the intentions of your heart? Do you see and experience God in your life? Are you aware of that? Is the passion in your heart actually dictating how you spend your time and what you do in relationship with people? Let me say it this way. In your life, is what's happening on the inside consistent with what's happening on the outside? And finally, is all that held together from a deepening place of becoming more like Jesus for the sake of others? You might be familiar with the author Stephen Covey. He's famous in Christian circles, but also just like Fortune 500 companies. Leadership, values, priorities, fantastic stuff. And he has this line that says, when it comes to living out our values and how we integrate our passion and who we are into the way that we live our lives, he says that the key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities. What would it mean to actually live outwardly the values that are in your heart? And all of this is part of the framing of what I want to point to today quickly. Again, not an expansive teaching, but just a thing to poke the bear a little bit as we talk about the future and where we're headed today. That all of these questions and these statements of value and the way that we express the passion, that as we become more like Jesus, we can't help but to become someone different and concerned for things and ask the question, is the outward expression of our life congruent with what's happening on the inside? All of this is part underneath this third gap that we're naming today. And as we aim towards a future together that is aligned with the idea that we will become a person of love. You will become a person of love by being continually transformed into the image of Jesus for the sake of others. And one of the very human obstacles in that journey is in the gap that we're naming integration. It's a term from psychology. It's a theological term. It can be a sociological term. I'm not going to do that with you today, although it's so tempting. I'm not. In a sentence, I'd say it is this way. I'd say it this way. When your integration is healthy, who you are becoming matches what you're doing. Your passion matches what you do. Your passions get expressed out of this inner connection with God and the power of the Holy Spirit in your life, and then in this journey of lifelong transformation. And in an all-encompassing way, like every corner, nook, and cranny gets expressed of your life, and that matches who you say you are and the intention of your heart. You set the sail of the trajectory of your heart towards God, and then everything begins to line up. You prioritize your values, and you do the stuff. That's integration. We've named a few gaps for the last few weeks, and they're key to our future. And I like charts, so I made one. So let me map the transformational journey of life. You're like, where are the notes? I'm going to get back to that maybe. I'm trying to be less of a nerd to you guys on Sundays. Is that okay? I'm walking a journey too. I'm walking a journey that the passion, sidebar, have any of you seen the Key and Peele skit? Yes, I mentioned that in church, where there's a scene, there's competing restaurants, and they're going after it about a dish, kebapi. No, it's chebapi. All right. But anyways, go look it up. And at one point, he looks at the other guy and he goes, "You'll have to excuse the behavior of my passion. Pardon me for the behavior of my passion. I feel very much like I need to, on the front end, apologize for the behavior of my passion that might follow today." Okay? So, made a chart. Passionate about charts, my friends. We've named some gaps. Week one, we talked about the gap of identity with a fundamental question underneath it that's asking, who am I? And so the goal of this lifelong journey of apprenticeship with Jesus is that identity gap closes as we are with Jesus and he tells us who we are and he gives us a new name and he settles those inner questions of our life. And then we name that gap of wholeness where we're asking really like, can I not be so broken? Who am I becoming? How is my life aligning to what Jesus said leads to life and life to the full, but also might lead to suffering? And I'm okay with either because the trajectory of my life is about who I'm becoming, not how much I can fix myself or play the comparison game or live for the approval of others. So the goal in that, as we center becoming like Jesus over the course of a lifetime, is simply to orient our lives to become like Jesus. And in this final gap today, we're naming this gap of integration. We're asking that question of like, what did God make me to do? As I'm being with Jesus and becoming like him, is it actually leading to doing the stuff? Am I doing the stuff? And that's the question. What is my purpose? And so the goal simply is to do what he would do. And as a church family, we want to orient our gatherings and our expressions of community and our worship and our programming and all that stuff to help more people belong on their journey of belief so that they can become more like Jesus. That is central. Memorize that chart. You will see that for the next 40 years with maybe some little changes because I like to nerd out on words, and that will never be the same thing, but the heart will be the same. And so I just want to loop back to you in these first questions and tell you, in your very human journey, and in the very human journey of all the people that are sitting in this room and they're outside of this room that God would call us to meet and close that gap with, in an inner dimension and an outward expression of love, that you were made for more. And this, like, let me encourage you, like this, your life, and this right here, as good as it may be, as painful as it may be, like, it's not as good as it gets. And I'm not promising you some life that is up and to the right always. I'm saying that there's a way to live these questions in relationship to Jesus where you orient your life around being with Jesus, becoming like him, and then just doing the stuff that no matter what, joy on the mountaintop and suffering in the valley, the answer can be the same, that I'm becoming a person of love and I'm fighting shade under God and I am looking to my eyes upon the hills from where does my help come from, and I just live the life in front of us and we reach and we include and we help people belong and people believe whatever that continuum is, and then we become like Jesus together. And that road is hard. Very, very real, though. And our lives are filled with all kinds of stuff. And there's the religious stuff. It's like trying to earn your way back to God. It's trying to do enough stuff so that God likes you or is pleased with you or at least eases your guilt or shame. Like, that's the religious stuff. As we talk about our future and we talk about what it means to align our lives in this trajectory to become like Jesus, I'm not interested in the religious stuff, are you? That stuff goes nowhere. No. Then you get the trivial stuff. This is where your life gets reduced to like project self and your hobbies and your family and your image and your career. And then at some point, this is part of everyone's story that it lines their life up to that trivial stuff. Not that they're bad on the surface. It's that when they become your universe, you wake up one day and you're like, man, this is actually a much smaller way of existing than I thought it was when I set my horizon of my life on what I can become and achieve and do and how I can be seen. This is actually a very small way to live. You're going to need something bigger than that. We need something bigger than that. And if you apprentice with Jesus, you're finding yourself in a part of a story that is cosmic and ancient and human and divine and bigger than any one of us. And there is no end to what you can discover and do as we go after that together. And then you get to the programmatic stuff. And this stuff is not bad, but for example, in church life, many of whom, probably all of us, have some degree of that. You've probably recognized that by now you can do, quote unquote, all the things in our church or in any church. You can do all the things that it has to offer, but it still does not guarantee transformation or lifelong apprenticeship to Jesus. You can do all the things, but it doesn't guarantee. You can be super busy in the church and remain completely untransformed. It will not lead to these gaps closing. It just looks like they are at a surface behavioral, like circle the wagons, be like us, and just be a depot person, like whatever that is. Like, I don't want to be down or out on the programmatic stuff. I'm just saying that there's always a deeper invitation, and on its own, it's not enough. What we're after together is altogether different. I want to tell you the story of a guy named John Wimber. John Wimber. What a cool last name. But why do I have to talk about a John? Because there are like 1,700 Johns in this room at all times. But here we go. John Wimber. No offense to all the Johns. There just seems to be, that's the name of the valley for dudes. I don't know. John Wimber. Like, he's one of the founders of what's the Vineyard movement, if you're familiar with that. Before he became a Christian, he was a musician. And he was deeply, deeply involved in like the musician scene. The drugs, the partying, the nightly casual relationships. But underneath that, he was a real seeker at heart. He was a longer for meaning and for truth of some kind. And he thought that he had found it in the music scene. And then kind of out of nowhere, he encounters Jesus. And as someone who was not churched, he had like this profound realization. And he talked to other Christians, and he'd be like, yo, did you know that God has a book? He'd be like, yeah, we know he has a book. It's called the Bible. He'd just be blown away by the idea, and he'd tell them, I'm like, I don't think that people know that. And then he'd be like, have you read the book? Have you read that book? And I'd be like, yeah, man, we've read it. And then he asked, like, did you know that book was about Jesus? Have you ever read about Jesus, who Jesus is, and what Jesus has done? They'd be like, yeah. Yes, John Wimber, we're familiar with Jesus. Like, we're a Christian. He'd be like, well, that's incredible. Like, I've read God's book. And I've read what Jesus has to say. And I love his teaching and what he did. And I love it. Like, do you love it? Yes, John Wimber, we love it. Great. Well, then I only have one question for you. When do we get to do the stuff that Jesus talks about in his book? They're like, oh, no. Chill, John Wimber. We don't do the stuff. We just read God's book about Jesus. Then he had this thing that like just grew in his heart that said, no, I want to do the stuff. And if I could say what a pillar of the future of our journey following Jesus will be like as we close the integration gap and we live as a prophetic witness to the kingdom of God, seeing our lives transformed and participating in the transformation of others. Like, we want to orient our lives and the life of our church towards doing the Jesus stuff. Do the Jesus stuff. And that's, like, we're drowning in content. Drowning in content. And if more theology and more content was the key to transformation, we'd all be so like Jesus right now. If more Bible reading and quick devos in the chair in the morning and the YouTube Bible reading plan, I'm not out on any of those things. If just more reading and learning about Jesus' teachings was the key to transformation, we'd be so like Jesus. There's a gap. There's a gap in our hearts and in the way of the valley. And I'm not trying to like poop on the whole thing to you this morning. I'm not saying you're not. I'm just saying like there's a deeper invitation to do the Jesus stuff. To do it. Are you doing the Jesus stuff in your life? As a church family, are we actually doing the Jesus stuff? Or are we inclined towards the religious stuff and the trivial stuff and the programmatic stuff with such loyalty that we are willing to trade our growth and impact and all the Jesus stuff for the sake of our comfort and our preferences and our need for control? As we step into a new era of our church's history, let's build upon this core conviction that we exist to do the Jesus stuff. I said it last week, I'll say it again, that God is after nothing short of your whole life, and so are we. Why? So that together we can see the kingdom come in the valley as it is in heaven as we do the Jesus stuff together. And there are people, hundreds and thousands of people who are ready to be transformed as we unite around our call to do the Jesus stuff. Will we? Will we have the John Wimber moment? Or will we be like the people on the other side of that conversation? They're like, yeah, we know it. We've heard it. No. We don't do this stuff. We just read about the guy that did that one time. I'm reminded of Paul's letter that he wrote to church in Colossae. It's a letter that's called Colossians at this point. And Paul is in prison at this moment. Like he's in prison for doing the Jesus stuff. Literally in prison. Chained. In prison for doing the Jesus stuff. And he's visited by a church planter friend. Paul didn't plant this church, but a guy that planted the church is coming to him and he's saying, listen, we had a good start. We had some stuff happening. We had some momentum. Mission was happening. We were making disciples. And then we got really comfortable. And we started to get in bed with the empire and steal some of their power and just like the way it was becoming. And we lost our fervor. We lost our mission. We lost our sense of trajectory. We lost where we were going. And he's just going to Paul can you help me? What should I do in this moment? So he writes this letter. And in that letter, he says these words in chapter 3. And I'm going to read it from the Message. It's a paraphrase, if that hurts. Anyways, it's just for readability. So 3 verse 1, he says this. So if you're serious about living this new resurrection life with Christ, act like it. Pursue the things over which Christ presides. Don't shuffle along, eyes to the ground, absorbed with the things right in front of you. Look up. Be alert to what is going on around Christ. That's where the action is. See things from his perspective. Your old life is dead. Your new life, which is your real life, even though invisible to others, is with Christ in God. There's the identity piece. Hidden with Christ in God. He is your life. When Christ, your real life, remember, shows up again on this earth, you'll show up too. The real you, the glorious you. Meanwhile, be content with obscurity like Christ. And that means killing off everything connected with that way of death. In other words, adopt my way, put my teachings into practice, become like Jesus. And then he goes through a long list of things to avoid. And then I'm skipping down, he says, so chosen by God for this new life of love, dress in the wardrobe God picked out for you. Compassion and kindness and humility and quiet strength and discipline. Be even-tempered, content with second place, quick to forgive an offense. Forgive as quickly and completely as the Master forgave you, and regardless of what else you put on, wear love. It's your basic, all-purpose garment. Never be without it. Let the peace of Christ keep you in tune with each other, in step with each other. None of this is going off and doing your own thing. And cultivate thankfulness. Let the word of Christ, the Message, have the run of the house. Give it plenty of room in your lives. Instruct and direct one another. Sing your hearts out to God. Let every detail in your lives, words, actions, whatever, be done in the name of Jesus, thanking God the Father every step of the way. In other words, do the Jesus stuff. Do it with your whole self. Do it all the way. In just a minute, we're going to make space to kind of respond to this invitation again. I want to tell you more about exactly where we're heading, invite you into some things. But I want to convey this with 2 images, 2 ideas, 2 illustrations. And the first is a quote from a 4th century desert father. I know, you're jazzed. And the second is a painting from an 18th century French artist. I know, you're pumped for that as well. And so, Desert Father, as a part of my reading this week, I'm reading from a collection of it's called The Sayings of the Desert Fathers because, I'm me and you have to deal with it. And the Desert Fathers and the mothers, I'm not going to give a history other than to say they began to get uncomfortable with the level that the church was living into its call to make disciples and to do the Jesus stuff. And so they began to re-architect their lives and reorient things and seek a better way. And in my reading, there's this guy named Joseph of Pontificis, who's an older desert father, and he's visited by kind of an apprentice of his, a student of his, and it is captured this way. And it says this: Abba Lot went to see Abba Joseph. Abba Joseph's like the older mentor. And he said to him, Abba, as far as I can say my little office, think like my Devo rituals, like the way I connect with God. It's like, I can say my little office, like I fast a little, I pray and I meditate, I live in peace, and as far as I can, I purify my thoughts. Like, what else can I do? In other words, he's asking, like, what else is there? I'm doing this stuff. I thought this was the stuff that would, like, transform me. And I'm doing it all. I'm not seeing it. His mentor responds and he says this. In answer to Lot's question, there's a typo. Jesus will forgive me. In answer to Lot's question, Joseph stood up and he stretched his hands towards heaven. And as he did so, his fingers became like 10 lamps of fire. And he said to Lot, if you will, you can become all flame. If you will, you can become all flame. All flame. Not like an ember of desire, but your whole life can be like a burning fire of passion to God. If you want, you can become all flame. Like that's a vision, my friends. Like that's a vision. Imagine like we go to coffee this week, and you're telling me about life, and you're asking for a little pastoral advice or listening ear, and I just look back at you and I'm like, yeah, that's great. But I got a word for you. If you will, you can become all flame. If you will, you will be like, what? It's okay. Here's my sense. Here's my sense of what this means for us. That you have been involved in a conspiracy to rob you of the burning passion of Jesus in your life. You've settled for less than Jesus offers. And I want to lovingly shake you this morning and remind you that if you want, you can have more than a cute little church life and a little bit of consistency. You can become all flame. In the words of Ignatius, another desert father, you can find God in all things. In the words of Jesus in John 14, where he says, very truly, I tell you, like actually truly, not just truly, but very truly, I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works I have been doing, and they will do even greater things than these, because I am going to the Father, and I will do whatever you ask in my name, so that the Father may be glorified in the Son. You may ask me anything in my name, and I will do it. It's always astounding to me the level of theological gymnastics we do to strip this words of Jesus from its meaning, where he literally says, not just true, like very truly, I tell you. Like, yeah, but when Jesus said very truly, he only meant like not actually truly. Like very truly, whoever believes in me, like you can do the Jesus stuff. You can become all flame. Excuse me for the behavior of my passion at a 4th century desert father. There is no silver bullet in this journey. There is only life together. There is only a direction. There's only a person. There's only another morning and another night and another morning and another night, another sunrise and another sunset, and days of inspiration and days that are just grinding it and white-knuckling it through life. We're coming up on fall, winter, and I'm seeing the boots start to make their way back out the closets. I'm seeing the sweaters and those burnt oranges and the mustard yellows. I'm seeing the spice everywhere. Your life is like an advertisement to this weird orange round thing that grows on the ground, and then we chop it up and make it a spice, which doesn't really have pumpkin. It's like nutmeg and cinnamon. It's a lie. It's a front. But like, I'm seeing that time of year come, and it's going to get cold. One of the best activities of this time of year is just a good old bonfire or fire in your fireplace at the house. How many of you love just a good fire, right? When I was growing up, when we lived in St. Albans, we had a wood-burning fireplace, which was way cooler. But then we moved to Taze Valley, and for a season, we had a gas-powered fireplace. We always had trouble with the pilot light. We all have trouble with the pilot light. Why won't this thing work? Why can't it stay lit? And like it took a while, and we figured it out, and we learned, if I'm remembering right, that there's a bit of an issue with the connection between like the pilot light and the source of the gas. You know that first time you crank up the gas light, Mama, please keep your fire off. Your house is like 100 degrees. I love you. You know that first time you turn the pilot light on, and then here comes the gas, and it's just the sound, like heat and warmth and sweat, and I need to go outside and roll in the snow. That's my reaction. Like, here's this thing, and there's always this moment from year to year. I lit the pilot light, but is it connected to the source? I want you to think of like your life as a pilot light. And the question that as you follow Jesus isn't, do I have any source of power to do the Jesus stuff and to find the life of more? and to have the ability to walk through suffering and become a person of love. The question is my connection intact? Because when it is, and if it is, and you'll genuinely give yourself to that connection, there is an endless source of fire and power behind you that is in the person of God who wants that for you. Your life can be like that. You can do the Jesus stuff. We can do the Jesus stuff and become all flame. That's the Desert Father, and now a painting. When I first saw this painting, I don't know how this speaks to you, but it was a kind of a profound experience for me. I've been wrestling with this for a few weeks. This was done by a French artist, Jean Verbet, in the 1883, I think. It's still hanging at the Met in New York City. But what you see here is some bishops and cardinals of the church sitting in their robes on nice couches, drinking tea, smiling, laughing, clearly not concerned with what this priest is saying. They're sitting under a real-life painting, which is the flaying of Bartholomew, which is one of the original apostolic sort of martyrs of the church. They're sitting under a painting that's chronicling the day in which people were willing to die for their faith and live on mission for Jesus in their comfort. And here comes this lowly priest in the black robe. And he's looking and he's gazing in their eyes. And Verbet is kind of crafting this painting as a little bit of a pushback to the excess and the comfort of the church in his day. And almost prophetically, like, I can see this resonating with me and for our day. And I just wonder what that priest is saying. What's in his heart? What are the words that are coming out of his mouth in that day? And what I can hear him say is, remember the Jesus stuff. Remember the Jesus stuff. Do the Jesus stuff. This painting has lived in my imagination a little bit inspiringly and a little bit hauntingly. And you look closer at this painting, not only is he talking, but I don't know if you noticed it. He's got his hand out and he's pointing. And in this painting, he's pointing to the wounds, the very real suffering that he is endured for, to see the church and its mission go forward. It's hard for me, well, I want to have a moment of pastoral confession for you. It's hard for me to describe to you how excited I am about our future together. It's hard for me to describe to you the excitement I have next week as we gather and we make some huge announcements, and we're making strides to center discipleship together and create teams and make more spaces for people to belong and come alongside you for the sake of the future and for the sake of your kids. It pains me, I'm so excited for what God wants to do in and through our church and in your lives as you meander towards Jesus in a way that solves and closes these gaps and you become more like Jesus, and that this place becomes a witness to our community, and it becomes a community of people that this valley can't live without. And we go from gathering around Sundays to gathering on Sundays, and then gathering around tables and living as the hands and feet of Jesus in the places where we live, work, and play. It's hard for me to tell you how excited I am for you. And really, next Sunday, please come back, because it will be a defining moment in the nearly 90-year story of our church family, because I believe the future is now. And from the very public and the very visible to the things that will take years to see blossom in our lives, things are changing. And there's a deep invitation in front of us for more of God, more of the Jesus stuff, more transformation, more healing, more generosity, more radical obedience and discipleship to the way of Jesus for the sake of people and the lost and the least and the forgotten and the marginalized, and for our kids who right now are looking at us and they're looking at a church and they're looking at its future and they're saying, I'm kind of out on that because it doesn't seem all the time like who they say they are is integrated with how they live their life. And there's an opportunity in front of us to change the script of the image and the power and of Jesus in our community and in our lives and in our homes. And if it doesn't start with us, it will not start. And so we're leaning into some big stuff. And the invitation is both like immediate, and it's exciting, and it's inspiring, but it's also lifelong. And it will some days be like walking on water, and some days it will be like walking through quicksand, feeling like you're falling and just going nowhere. God is calling us to stop some things, to reframe things, and to pioneer new ways to follow Him and to give our lives away for that. Let me tell you, like, if you're newer around here, you could not have found a better time to be looking for a place to belong as you work out a relationship with God. Hear me. Here's the moment of pastoral confession. Confession may not be the right word. Things feel pretty good right now. I don't know if you feel that. Feel pretty good. Decent. You look around, there's like more people in the room, and that's great. I love that. Love that. People are finding a safe place to ask questions. They're literally asking questions. Like, there's people that had no connection to here a month or two ago that are showing up and showing out and serving and finding like daily conversations around these gaps. But the great trap that we could fall into, even with all the exciting stuff that genuinely I am excited about, and I'm not the best hype man in the world, so I'm just speaking real genuinely as a guy that's inspired by a 4th century guy that lived in the desert in a French painting from 150 years ago. Like, this isn't hype. This is a deep invitation of both excitement and a critical warning that the great trap that we could fall into is doing a bunch of programs and creating an exciting buzz so that Christians from other churches can come to this church and be happy. That is not our heart. That is not our heart. And I got to say this from the bottom of my heart, that we are not just doing programs for happy Christians here. We are not just changing speakers so the sound can be nicer and we can all get more along around the way it sounds. We're not doing it to make JD's job easier and hand out a trophy and give ourselves a pat on the back and say, money well spent, bro. We're not doing that. We're not just building a thing that is exciting to be part of, although we certainly are. And I'm excited about it. We are about making disciples who are continually being transformed and becoming like Jesus and doing the Jesus stuff for real people, the lost, the least, the last, and again, the next generation who currently is not impressed at all with our lives and the reputation of the church and its ability to lead to transformation, not just more participation of nice, neat, tidy programs. We are about being a prophetic witness, and that's a weird phrase for some of you and something that like, yes, that clicks with me. We are about being a prophetic witness, not a pathetic one, a prophetic witness, that the mission of Jesus still matters and we will do whatever it takes. So here I am, calling you, asking you, whatever couch that you find yourself on, whatever hurt that has you like sitting again, whatever thing that's holding you back from going deeper into the invitation in a real way, not a prescribed way, but a defined way that is our life is about being with Jesus, becoming more like him, and then doing the Jesus stuff. Hear me as an old, beleaguered, lowly priest coming to you today. Get in the game. Come deeper. That's the invitation of God's heart always. We will live. We want to live on what we'll call the redemptive edge. We will always live in this space. Hear my heart in this. This is not an us versus them thing, but this is a very real thing that the life of Jesus lived in front of us. When we read him, when he did this stuff, this is what happened to him. We will always live in this space between being criticized by the religious and being ridiculed by the culture. We will live between being criticized by the religious and being ridiculed by the culture. We will live between criticism and utter darkness for the sake of shining a light that cannot be hidden. So, church family, in love, let me say this. If your goal is to punch your ticket to heaven, do a little behavior modification, participate in a few outreach opportunities every year, and see your kids become clean, neat, tidy, moral little things, we are not your church. I love you because we believe that God is after your whole life, and so are we. I want to be really honest up front and let you know what you're getting yourself into. For all the stuff, for the programs, for the necessary steps to create places and teams of belonging and to get people, welcoming people from the parking lot to the lobby to a check-in that is safer and expresses more who we are, to a remapping of how we do coffee and why we do things, and the expression of worship not just being this thing we do on Sundays, but it comes up out of our guts, out of the overflow of a life aimed at Jesus in community with one another. That's who we will be. And if you're looking for a place to belong and to be loved and accepted and to find a place that will embrace the slow and messy journey of becoming like Jesus, look no farther. We will fumble our way into that journey with you forever. And if you're willing to give your life away so that our neighborhoods and our community can be transformed in the same way, like, let's do it together. Let's go all in. Let's lean up to the edge of our seat. Let's serve. Let's live generously. Let's see the kingdom break in through our lives in ways we didn't know was actually possible. And whether this is your first Sunday or your 500th here, I want it to cost you something. That's the actual invitation of Jesus. Pick up your cross and follow me. There's life, and there's life to the full, and there's suffering to the full. But whether we don't judge our life by our circumstances, because when the upper floor bottoms out, all we're left with is that inner world with us and Jesus. I want you to feel the burden of the mission that we are called to, because we're not here to do happy programs for other Christians. We are here to follow Jesus and do the Jesus stuff together. And if this is your last Sunday with us, thank you. It's honestly been great to have you. Honestly been great to have you. We love you. We will send you out well. We love you. But that's the call in our heart. Leslie Newbegin once said, I think the deepest motive for mission is simply the desire to be with Jesus where he is, on the frontier between the reign of God and the usurped dominion of the devil. Jesus said we were become like Jesus. And as we become like him, not like in a way of Western spirituality or just generic Christianity, but as we become like Jesus, our lives will naturally do the Jesus stuff. And so I'm going to invite you to stand. We're going to take another moment this week to reflect on this, because I would be doing you a disservice if I just spoke from the passion of my heart and then was convinced that through my words and through this content, more theologizing, we walk out of here transformed or even interacting. Our lives are crazy chaotic. And one of the gifts that we can have together is to give space that maybe right now you're struggling to put into the daily lived experience of your life, where you can genuinely look to God, listen for God, and take a step. And so we want to offer that opportunity. I want you to do the Jesus stuff. It's my vision that everywhere you go, you will do the Jesus stuff. I want us to do the Jesus stuff. And I know that's a phrase that's not very sophisticated, but you get it. I want to see this church unleash thousands upon thousands upon thousands of homes and families and people living their lives doing the Jesus stuff for the sake of his kingdom. And here's one final thought, and I'm going to invite you into a moment of invitation and guide you in that. Here's the thought, that you can do something that looks like the Jesus stuff without being a disciple of Jesus. But you cannot be a disciple of Jesus without it leading to do the Jesus stuff. So the invitation, even in that, is not to get really inspired and go say, what problem can I fix? The deeper invitation is to leave here today and say, I want to center my life around knowing God, being with Jesus, becoming like him, and then inevitably, as a burdened passion of who I am, my life becomes congruent and it lines up, and I can't help but to do the Jesus stuff. Be inspired, but let it lead not to action first. Let it lead to a deepening relationship with Jesus so that your life will live as a reflection of its deepest relationship with Jesus himself. So I invite you to close your eyes for a moment. You can put your hands out again in a posture of openness, of willingness, of surrender. It's a way of connecting our body to the moment, and our brain, our spirit, and to our soul. And I want to give you a singular image today. And that image is of a prison cell. Paul wrote his letter to the church in Colossians from a prison cell for doing the Jesus stuff. And you may be here today and you may be saying, yeah, I want to do the Jesus stuff. I tried that once and I got burned. It's a good thing that I'm in the room, Matt. You don't I'm here. That's good enough. And I would say to you gently, wherever you are, God is with you in that. It's not my place to locate you on some journey. But I want you to think imaginatively. This is an ancient practice of prayer about yourself in some sort of prison cell. And I want you to think about whatever experiences left you there. And today you may feel imprisoned by the pain of regret from the past. You may feel yourself imprisoned by the shame that you live with and you carry. You may find yourself imprisoned, trapped by an inner world that will not calm down, by questions that still remain unanswered, by doubts that no one has approached you with and led you safely to explore those. You may be imprisoned by the opinions of other people, by the comparison game. You may be imprisoned by the fear of vulnerability and putting yourself out there, because what if I try to do the Jesus stuff and I become criticized and my friends group changes and I find myself experiencing something that I can't guard myself from. I want that, but I can't because my control is imprisoning me from doing the Jesus stuff. Name that for yourself. And now picture Jesus walking up to the edge of your cell with a key in his hand. And all he's doing is coming to you with words, without words, with a gentle look in his eyes, without judgment or shame or condemnation. He looks at you and he puts the key into the lock and he opens it, and he just opens the door, and then he slips off again into the crowds like he always did. And he laid before you an invitation of increased depth and increased maturity and increased awareness of the presence of God. And the invitation is to come and follow him where he goes. Picture yourself days later. You've taken some steps. Maybe you're in conversation with Jesus now and you're asking him about what took you so long to come to the door? I've been asking for a key out of this prison for a long time. And gently and kindly, without rebuke but with compassion, said, my friend, the door was never even locked. The door wasn't locked. But you needed me to show you that I have already unlocked. I have already made a way out of the prison of guilt and shame and fear and hopelessness. And the invitation is with you now, it was with you then, and it will be in front of you every day, every new day, and every new evening. To take a step to lovingly and sacrificially follow me, and to aim your life to becoming more like me. And guess what? We will do the Jesus stuff. Very truly, I tell you that there is greater things coming through your suffering and through your joy, through your contentment and through your unease. There is greater ahead of you. So in this moment, I just invite you to interact with whatever the Spirit might be saying to you, loving you, and inviting you towards as we sing this song together.